My name is Elowen, and I wish I could tell you this story has a happy ending. But right now, I'm still living it, still trying to figure out where my life goes from here. I'm sharing it because maybe someone out there will understand the choices we make when we're desperate, and the consequences we never see coming. My mother and I lived in a cramped two-room apartment on the edge of town. The walls were damp, the electricity unreliable, but it was all we could afford. She'd been bedridden for nearly 2 years, her legs too weak to carry her, her body so thin it hurt to look at. I spent every morning spoon-feeding her oatmeal and every night helping her bathe with a bowl of warm water. Some days, I didn't know who was more exhausted, her or me. We lived on the edge of every bill, every rent payment, every hospital visit. Debt collectors slipped notes under our door. The medicine that eased her pain cost more than I made in a month working part-time running errands for villagers. Every day I wondered how long we could last. Then one night, lying on the cold tile floor scrolling through my phone, I saw an ad. Change your life forever. Surrogacy opportunities available now. Generous compensation. I'd heard of surrogacy before, but never thought it could be my reality. I clicked the link, my heart hammering. It felt wrong, but at the same time, it felt like hope, like the only way to buy my mother the time she deserved. I didn't tell her. I told myself it was for her own good, that if I could hide the pregnancy long enough, I'd have the money before she ever realized what I'd done. Since she was bedridden and couldn't stand or move from her bed, it felt possible. I went through the application, interviews, and medical checks in secret, lying about where I was going when I stepped out in the mornings. The day I met Adrian and Celine was like stepping into another world. They arrived in a black SUV, both dressed like they'd walked off the cover of a magazine. Adrian had a warm smile and firm handshake. Celine's perfume filled the room, floral and sharp. They spoke gently, calling me brave and selfless. They said they'd been trying to have a baby for years and wanted to make sure I was comfortable. They offered to rent a house where my mother and I could move, so I could rest during the pregnancy with nurses nearby if I needed them. It felt like the answer to every prayer I'd ever whispered over my mother's sleeping form. I moved my mother into the new house a week later. It had running water, a fridge that worked, a bed that didn't sag in the middle. My mother looked around the first morning, tears streaming down her face as sunlight poured through the clean windows. She thanked me for somehow giving her the one thing she thought she'd never have, a dignified home. She didn't know the cost. I thought I could keep hiding it, that I could wear loose dresses and position myself so she wouldn't notice the swelling in my stomach. For a while, it worked. She spent most days staring out the window or sleeping, but one afternoon, while I helped her sit up to eat, her frail hand brushed against my belly. Her eyes, once so dull from illness, focused sharply on me. Her lips parted. "Elowen," she whispered, voice trembling. Are you pregnant?" "Mama, I can explain." Tears welled in her eyes. She started sobbing, her bony shoulders shaking. "What did I do to you? What kind of mother lets her only child become—" She couldn't finish. Her words broke apart into gasping cries. She kept repeating, "I failed you. I failed you." I held her tightly, but she felt so small, like a fragile bird. "Mama, please. I did this for us. For you. So we could have a future. So you could get better." She looked up at me through tears. "There are some things worse than dying, Elowen," she whispered. Her words pierced me deeper than any blade. After that, a silence settled between us. I still cared for her, still fed and washed her, but our conversations grew shorter. Sometimes I'd catch her staring at me with a haunted look. Other times, she'd turn her face to the wall, as if the sight of me hurt her. And so the days passed. My belly grew. The baby kicked inside me like a constant reminder of what I'd done. Adrian and Celine kept in touch, showering me with promises. They visited with gifts, fancy creams for stretch marks, imported fruit, little pink onesies for the baby girl I carried. Their kindness soothed the ache in my heart, even if, deep down, I worried about the lie my life had become. Adrian and Celine's visits became the bright spots in my weeks. They arrived in their gleaming car, always smiling, bringing new gifts each time. Sometimes they'd stay for hours, sitting in my living room, telling stories of their travels, and promising a bright future for my mother and me. They called me family, said they'd make sure we'd never struggle again. At first, it felt like a dream. They came to every doctor's appointment, asked thoughtful questions, and held my hand when the doctor showed the ultrasound. Adrian wiped away a tear the first time he heard the baby's heartbeat. Celine stroked my hair and told me I was giving them the most precious gift imaginable. I thought, maybe my mother will see I made the right choice. Then, slowly, something changed. Their visits became shorter. Then they started missing appointments entirely, sending polite texts to say they were caught up in meetings or had an urgent trip abroad. Days passed without a single message. I'd stare at my phone late into the night, rereading old chats where they called me their angel. The more they disappeared, the heavier the silence grew between my mother and me. She rarely spoke now, conserving every breath. When she did, it was usually to apologize for being a burden. I told her to stop, that she was my reason for everything. But the words felt hollow when I couldn't promise her things were getting better. One evening, I was cleaning the kitchen when my phone buzzed. I grabbed it, heart leaping. Maybe it was Adrian or Celine finally checking in. But it was only a spam message. I sank to the floor, pressing my forehead against the cold tile. The loneliness was suffocating. Meanwhile, my belly grew heavier by the day. The baby's kicks became stronger. Each movement reminded me time was running out, and I still hadn't seen Adrian or Celine in weeks. I tried calling their numbers. Sometimes they rang. Sometimes they went straight to voicemail. Other times, I'd get a cold automated response. This number is not available. I called the surrogacy agency, but they told me they had no recent contact with the couple and couldn't help me further. Mrs. Kadiri, our elderly neighbor, checked in often, bringing soups or helping me lift my mother to change the bed sheets. She'd sit on the edge of my mother's bed, humming old songs while I rested. Sometimes, I caught her watching me with worried eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. Then came the night my mother's breathing grew ragged. Her eyes fluttered open, clouded and unfocused. I sat beside her, holding her hand, whispering that everything would be okay, that once the baby was born, I'd have the money, and we could afford the best doctors. But even as I spoke, I could see in her eyes that she didn't believe me anymore. "Promise me," she rasped. "You'll live your own life, alone." I promised, but I don't know if she heard me. She slipped back into a restless sleep, each breath sounding like it could be her last. I spent the next nights tossing and turning, nightmares swirling in my head. I dreamed of giving birth alone in the dark, of people coming to snatch the baby from my arms, of my mother calling out to me from somewhere I couldn't reach. Every morning, I woke up drenched in sweat, whispering desperate prayers into the room. By now, I was so heavy I could barely move without gasping for breath. Mrs. Kadiri came daily, helping me cook simple meals and tending to my mother. She never asked about Adrian and Celine, but I could see the concern etched into her kind face. One afternoon, as I napped beside my mother, I felt a deep, sharp pain ripple through my belly. I woke up breathless. The pains came faster, closer together. Panic set in as I realized the baby was coming. I called Mrs. Kadiri, voice shaking. She arrived in minutes, while her daughter stayed behind to watch over my mother. We hurried to the hospital, my contractions growing unbearable. Through the haze of pain, I kept thinking, where are Adrian and Celine? Why aren't they here? I told myself they'd come any moment, that they'd burst into the delivery room smiling, ready to take the baby they'd longed for. But in my heart, I felt something cracking. I knew I was standing on the edge of something terrible. The hospital lights felt blinding as they wheeled me into the delivery room. The pain was like a tidal wave, crashing over me again and again. Between contractions, I kept glancing at the door, praying I'd see Adrian or Celine appear, smiling and ready to keep their promises. They never came. Hours later, after screams and tears and blood, I gave one final push. A cry rang out, a tiny, fierce sound that made the world go silent. The nurse placed my daughter in my arms, her skin warm and soft. In that moment, despite everything, I felt love so deep it terrified me. I looked at the clock on the wall, marking the time of her birth, 3:47 a.m. I whispered her name to her, even though I knew she might not be mine for long. Some hours later, the nurse returned, her expression grave. She said there was a phone call for me. Confused and weak, I handed my baby to a nurse and answered the call, heart pounding. It was Mrs. Kadiri's daughter on the line, her voice breaking as she told me, "Elowen, I'm so sorry. Your mother passed away at home right after midnight." I clutched the edge of the bed for support. The world tilted. I realized my mother's final breath had come just as I'd brought my daughter into the world. While I was welcoming life, death had taken the person I loved most. In the haze of exhaustion and grief, I waited for Adrian and Celine. I called their numbers, each time hearing only silence or a mechanical voice telling me the line was disconnected. I begged the nurses to call, again and again, but no one came. No one called back. The next morning, the hospital told me I'd need to leave soon. The baby was legally considered mine, since the intended parents were nowhere to be found. I was discharged with nothing but a thin hospital blanket wrapped around my daughter. My arms shook as I carried her outside into the dawn light. Mrs. Kadiri was waiting at the hospital entrance, eyes red and tired. She helped me into a taxi and held my baby so I could rest my head against the window. Back at the house, she moved quickly, calling an ambulance to take my mother's body to the mortuary, making arrangements with neighbors to prepare for a funeral. She never asked for anything in return. She just kept telling me, "You're not alone, Elowen." 3 months later, we buried my mother. The small ceremony was simple, but filled with love. People who had known her as a kind woman who shared what little she had came to pay respects. I stood by the grave, my baby girl in my arms, tears sliding down my cheeks as I whispered promises to my mother's memory. After the burial, I tried to rebuild. Mrs. Kadiri called her children in the U.S., explaining what had happened. They began sending money every month, enough to pay the rent and buy formula. I started taking on cleaning jobs, working before dawn and after sunset so I could spend the day with my daughter. Every time I thought I couldn't go on, I looked into her eyes, so full of innocence and trust, and found the strength to keep moving. Adrian and Celine never returned. I searched online, hoping to find clues about them, articles, social media profiles, anything. But it was like they had vanished off the face of the earth. The surrogacy agency claimed they had no responsibility, since they couldn't contact the couple either. Lawyers told me I technically had custody by default, but the contracts I signed were vague, and my fear of what could happen if they reappeared kept me awake at night. Mrs. Kadiri's kindness was a lifeline. She cooked meals for us, held the baby when I needed to shower, and offered quiet words of comfort when I broke down. Sometimes I'd find her in the rocking chair, humming old lullabies to the baby with tears glinting in her eyes. Her children's support meant I could stay in the house Adrian and Celine once paid for, even renewing the rent when it came due. I never stopped feeling like I was living on borrowed time, like everything could collapse if they decided to come back. Each day, I woke up determined to give my daughter love and safety. I told her stories about her grandmother, the strongest woman I ever knew, and whispered prayers over her crib at night, asking for protection. I kept her close, memorizing every coo, every giggle, every sleepy sigh. She became my entire world. But deep down, the fear never left. I lay awake in the dark, imagining a black SUV pulling up in the driveway, two strangers stepping out with cold eyes and legal papers. I wondered what I would do, whether I had any right to keep the child I brought into the world but never meant to raise. Then, one faithful sunny Sunday afternoon, I sat on my couch, scrolling through Facebook because I was bored. Suddenly, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, and the moment I heard the voice on the other end, a chill ran down my spine.